It is just a huge honor today to be in the podcast studio with none other than Rod Kurthy. My gosh, the legend from Dentaltown. You've been my idol and my legend for so many years. He's the founder and CEO of Evolve Dental Technologies, home of the KöR Whitening System and Perfect Cigar Solutions, which I'm still not sure if they're perfect because there's no T on the perfect. So how can perfect be perfect if you forgot the perfect T at the end? Rod practices in Irvine, California. He graduated magna cum laude from Fairleigh Dickinson. If you're Irish, that means at the top of the class. From Fairleigh Dickinson University School of Dentistry in 1978 and completed a GP residency at Newark, Beth, Israel Medical Center. Rod's 44 years of scientific research and development include laser and surgical periodontal bone regeneration, endodontic surgery, including bone regeneration and repair of resorptive lesions, teeth whitenings, teeth sensitivity, development of several cosmetic techniques and impression techniques, and even credible professional marketing techniques designed to attract only high-quality patients. His first participation in periodontal research was in 1976, the 200-year anniversary of America, and teeth whitening in 1977. Dr. Kurthy is a recipient of many awards and accolades, including the Mosby Scholarship Award, FDU Prosthodontics and Pediatric Dentistry Awards, the Omicron Kappa Epsilon National Dental Honor Society Gold Key Award, and a commendation from the Chief Attorney of the United States Department of Defense for his role in supporting military's family rights and disputes with insurance carriers. Rod's efforts were directly responsible for forcing Blue Cross of California to correct their explanation of benefit comments to conform to accepted practice. Possibly Rod's favorite honor ever, upon the only polling ever organized by Dentaltown.com, Rod was selected as the most respected member of Dentaltown by over 60,000 of his peers. I always love it when these other magazines say, top 100 speakers in dentistry. Can I see the survey on that? Can I see the math on that? Actually, it came right from the marketing department. Between 86 and 1993. Oh, no, that was another deal. I go on, but you have 10,000 posts on Dentaltown. You were one of the first Dirty Dozen on Dentaltown. Do you remember those days?
Very first day. Yeah, it was exciting. It was just an email group. And as I was mentioning to you, it was my very good longtime friend, Howie Horrocks. He contacted me and he said, Howard is starting this thing, and he asked me if I would be on there to talk about marketing and things like that. And he said, you want to go and chime in and help, because we had done a lot together, And he said, Howard has been so fantastic to me. He said, I owe Howard everything. And he said, when we go on, he said, if you're going to do this with me, don't ask me any leading questions or anything about me promoting my own business. He said, this is going to be just for Howard, because Howard has helped me so much. And Howie's opinion hasn't changed in all these years.
He's a great, I love him.
He is a great guy. He is a really great guy. Yeah.
He's living in Vegas. He lives in Vegas.
Yeah.
And love that guy. So my gosh, you have always been the leader of the pack in so many issues you joined that in 2000 for 20 years just on Dentaltown.
Wasn't that 1999?
Well, that's so funny because we didn't have programmed the member sense feature till 2000.
Yeah.
So it went live on March 17, 2000. So you're a member of March 17, 2000. But yeah, we were doing that in late 98, early 99.
I know it was before that.
But we were just, we just had Ken Scott, who you just talked to a minute ago. I mean, we've always been a year behind on our programming. Everything everybody wants takes about a year to get out. But my gosh. So I want to start with, I would say when people talk to me about you, probably the most associated thing you're associated with is Kor Whitening.
Yes.
And the first thing they want to know is what are those two? You got two little dot things above the O, and then you leave the T out on perfect. Is English a second language for you, Ron?
Okay, all right, okay. So it's It's a long story. I'll try and make it as short as I can. You remember that the technique, I called it deep bleaching. And oh my God, on Dental Town, it went crazy. And I came out in 2003 with my book called Deep Bleaching, the Holy Grail of Teeth Whitening. And everybody was going nuts over that and literally around the world. And that's when, the technique, which really hasn't changed much at all since then, was great. And it was getting teeth really, really white. But what it was doing was it was enhancing the ability to whiten, but it was also enhancing the negative effects like sensitivity. And so people were experiencing a hell of a lot of sensitivity. And everybody kept saying, well, you need to start your own company and create products, lower sensitivity, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, we started the company in 2007. And by this time, I'd had 2 different intellectual property law firms trying to get me a registered trademark on deep bleaching. And we couldn't get it. And the more money I spent, the more frustration I experienced. And the USPTO, United States Patent and Trademark Office, would not give me a registered trademark because they said that first it was too generic, deep bleaching, 2 English words together. We don't like that. And the other thing that they said that made it specifically not available to receive a registered trademark was that the name deep bleaching was descriptive of the process. And they looked into it and they said, yeah, the process allows you to bleach teeth more deeply. So you can't have that. So after tons of time, what happened was I ended up in lawsuits, a company in Australia, 2 companies in the UK, and 1 company in the United States were using the term deep bleaching and my name, saying that they were the company, the selling, and of course, they not even close. And try challenging companies like that when you don't own the registered trademark. Really, really tough, especially when it's international. Big, big money. And so, the marketing firm Landmark.
Yeah.
And we were working with them. Yeah, they're wonderful people. So we said we need to come up with a name to change deep bleaching to that we can get registered right away. So anyway, they worked on it. We had this huge team working on it, and they came up with 12 possibilities. And then they gave them to us, and for each one, they had a whole paragraph explaining what it was about that was cool, why they had come up with that. And they said, we have given this to every employee on the team there at Landmark. And they said, we want you, meaning my wife, myself, and my daughter Shannon, to look at them. And individually, we want you to choose without talking to each other. Well, as it turns out, every single person at Landmark, my wife, my daughter, and myself.
Landmark 360?
Yes,
Landmark
it's now called Landmarks 360. Yes.
Okay.
And so all of us selected KöR. And I'll kind of go, a lot of people think it has to do with my name because my initials are RK, and this would be K and R transposed, has nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing to do with it. It's funny, at trade shows and things like that, dentists will come up and they'll say, hey, is Dr. KöR around? No, it's Dr. Kurthy. So anyway, KöR, one of the things they suggested was they say, hey, we can say KöR, and then you turn it around and you put an S on the end of it, is rocks. You can say, hey, we can say KöR rocks, which we've never done. Another thing was, this is the name of the products. And the products, I suppose you could say, are the core of the system. So that's another thing. Also, I don't know about anybody else out there, but I, at my age, looking back, over my years, and it may be, different perception now, I always felt that products that came from Europe were more solid with less marketing spin hype than products from the U.S. Products from the U.S., always had this huge marketing spin, and they never performed like that. And I knew we were going to be providing products that were the real deal and did everything that we said. And so I wanted to have kind of a European flair. Also, I wanted to be seen as the designer end of what we do, really the highest end. And really all the main designers come from Europe. Christian Dior and Louis Vuitton, all that. And so that's where the umlaut, the 2 dots above the O, came from, is to give it a European flair. Also, by being only 3 letters with the brackets around it, it's a very attractive small logo. And KöR, it's 1 syllable and it's catchy. And so that's it. You know now everything I know about it.
Well, it's very interesting because when you go to the European countries, they don't have a marketing department. And you go to a Ivoclar. Thanks, Ryan. You go to like Ivoclar and they have like 80 guys with a PhD. And then you go to American companies the same size and they don't have a single PhD, but they have an 80-person call center and a cheerleader. So,
yes.
And then you go to China and I have some glorious friends in China. Ryan, who's my best friend in China? Godfrey. Where they believe if you make it so cheap, everybody will have to buy it. In Europe, mostly Germans and Ferrari, Austria, Liechtenstein, Scandinavia, all build it so good it'll sell itself. And then America is like the Howie Horrocks, like Howard Klein, a genius marketer, Landmark 360, is like, my God, we're so good at advertising. We could sell ice cream and snow to Eskimos. And I've always said that everybody needs to learn the other things. Germans would do so well to learn how to make things lower cost. Americans would do so well just to make something just kind of work. I mean, I think it was so funny. And when I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, there was this there was like an 85-year-old dentist who she left Nazi Germany to save her life.
Wow.
And but when she got here, they wouldn't honor her dental license. And she went and got a license. They said, well, we don't acknowledge a license from Germany. I mean, hell, they make Mercedes-Benz. This is home of the Chrysler, damn it.
Yeah.
And we're not going to let any Mercedes-Benz dentist come over to our country. And it's like, my God, I bet she probably would have been the best dentist in Europe. Look at the lab techs.
Yeah.
I mean, they have, their lab techs, their Crown and Bridge lab techs are like as good as our prosthodontists.
Have you seen the Japanese lab techs?
I have not.
In Japan, they have schooling over there up to the PhD level in dental laboratory technology.
Well, when I went over there the first time, I said, okay, now there's a joke in America that you guys do Crown and Bridge with alginate. It was not a joke, but their alginate is stored like your bleaching. When they take alginate as serious as you take carbamide peroxide, and it's so perfect and it's so mixed perfectly and the water is so exact that the lab techs over there said Japanese take better impressions with alginates than Americans can do with vinyl polysiloxane because, like you say, they take that stuff serious. And so there's only 2 countries that can make a car. I mean, come on. I mean, when someone comes up to you and says, I know you're a big car buff. What are you driving now?
My daily driver is a V10 Audi R8.
An Audi, that's German.
Yes.
Yeah. And my God, and how would you compare that to?
Owned by Volkswagen.
Yeah. Owned by Volkswagen.
Along with Bugatti and Bentley.
Yeah.
And Porsche.
And
Lamborghini.
and Americans, like look at Boeing. It's so, it's so American. It's vulgar. I know everybody thinks it's the greatest country in the world and everything, but everybody says it's the greatest country in the world. They're just telling you I've never gone to another country. And so Boeing's headquarters is in Chicago. They assemble the big thing in Seattle, and the fuselage is made in Wichita, Kansas. And then you go to Honda, and it's one campus, and everybody's there. So we're having lunch, and Rod says, well, how's your day going? Well, I don't know who the hell designed that stupid windshield wiper, but it's so stupid. And Rod's thinking, I designed the windshield. What are you talking? You know what I mean? They're all there.
Yeah.
Everybody, one one team were all there and they just knock it out of the park. America, the management doesn't even know what's wrong on the assembly line in Wichita, Kansas, and Seattle. And then 3 planes have to fall out of the sky before you. And the more you read about that mess, they shouldn't even call it a Boeing scandal. They should just call, what is America doing? Why? I mean, all these car companies do is they assemble parts made from 30,000 other people. And why?
Yeah.
Because of the military contracts, every congressman wanted some company from Indiana to get in on the business.
Yeah.
So the military contracts have fragmented the whole industry deal because everybody had to have a plant in a voting district. So now we just make crap instead of just going back and putting it all together. And that's kind of why I'm a big fan of owner-operated dental offices as opposed to DSOs.
Well, the same.
Has Shannon made you a or have you got a grandchildren?
No, no.
Your daughter's name is Shannon?
Shannon.
Has Shannon made grandchildren?
No,
back?
she's not married.
But if she made you a granddaughter and you passed on, would you want? I'm serious. I mean, do you think a DSO is going to be okay, or would you rather go to an owner-operated dentist? And how would you weigh the decision between you're out there in the bedrock of Pacific Dental with Stephen Thorne?
Yeah.
Would you feel just as comfortable as your granddaughter going to Pacific Dental as you would going to owner-operated? And why?
Of course not.
This is Dentistry Uncensored. Don't
Well,
say.
it goes all back to the corporate attitude. When we dentists. We become dentists for different reasons, and financial is one of them. Mom and dad says, hey, become a dentist because they make a lot of money. But really, by the time we get in there, one of our main goals is pride in what we do and taking good care of our patients without someone over our shoulder saying, faster, 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 no, use this cheaper stuff, no. And I'm certainly not an expert on this, but when it comes to the corporate dental, no, but I mean,
if you're not an expert on anything in dentistry, who is?
No, but I mean the corporate. I haven't been involved in the corporate dental field, but from what I've seen from the outside and talking to people, you're more of an employee who treats patients than I would call a doctor who treats patients. To me, a doctor is someone with their own practice who takes responsibility for their patients, and the buck stops here, type of a thing. And it was, it's funny because it's that type of thing that resulted in me starting KöR Whitening. When on Dental Town, one of the things that everyone was pushing me toward is starting my own company, because with the technique for deep bleaching, the products out there didn't work well with it and created a lot of discomfort. And so they said, Rod, you got to start your own company and develop your own products. We need to lower the sensitivity, get rid of sensitivity. And God, they drove me freaking nuts.
Well, but I want to stop this story because I lived through this whole from Who's Rod to this big name with 10,000 posts. You were showing your other people were showing bleaching cases that the first case she doesn't have makeup on and it's kind of dark. The next one she looks like she just got
with red lipstick.
Yeah, she looks all gorgeous with dark red lipstick in her. You went right after the worst case. You went after tetracycline stained teeth.
Yeah.
And you knew where a dentist would be like, damn. And
I was like, damn.
You were showing tetracycline cases where there was one real dentist who'd say, "Oh, that's bullshit." They were like, "Damn." So did you do tetracycline just because that was the holy grail worst case?
No. Here, let me tell you how it started.
You felt guilty of prescribing all those tetracycline to the pregnant women early on in your practice, and now you're trying to fix their children?
I did a really bloody residency in Newark, New Jersey, in the inner city, and it was just traumatic and exciting. And when I finished my residency and I started practicing, I loved dentistry, but I was bored. I loved doing dentistry, but there wasn't enough excitement in my life. So I decided that Fridays would become my research day. And all the research that I've done in all the various fields, it all came from having a patient who had a particular problem that I didn't think there was a good enough product or good enough technique. And then I would do my research and all this kind of stuff. And I would figure out what direction I wanted to go. And then I'd start contacting companies out there saying, hey, I need to work with chemists and, and et cetera. I can't do that myself. And if you're willing to do that with me, when we're done, you own it. I don't want any part of it. I'm just doing this for fun. I need to not go crazy, mentally. And so anyway, so that's what I did. So anyway, back before the term extreme makeover came out, I had a gal come in, and she was in her later 50s, I think, and did, I think, 20 veneers. Came out beautiful, and so she's just going nuts. And so a few weeks later, she came back to the office, wanted to talk to me in person. She says, I have a daughter who's 28 years old. We, meaning her husband and her, we had orthodontics done on her. She's never had a cavity, wonderful teeth, but they're really, really weird color that no one's been able to fix. So she lives an hour and a half from here. I'm going to pay to have you do on her what you did on me. Okay, I like that. And so she comes in, and it was some sort of dismineralization. I don't know what, but I'll describe it. The background color of the teeth was an A2, and 60% approximately of the surface area was these brown swirls. And we lovingly called her our Hershey Bar patient because after she was gone the first time, I was trying to describe the color of brown. It's not light chocolate, it's not dark chocolate. And one of my assistants said, hey, it's the same color as a Hershey Bar. Boom, so I wrote that in there. So that's how we referred to her. So anyway, when she first came in, I said, I know that people have tried to whiten your teeth with no success, but I told her my first involvement in whitening research was in 77, so I had a lot under my belt at that time. And so I said, I want to get your teeth as light as we possibly can. There's no way I'm going to get them white, but I want to get them as light as we can because I don't want to drill any more off the surface of your teeth than I have to. And I don't want to have to make them too opaque so that they look like toilet bowls.
What year was this?
Oh, God, this would have been in right around 96, probably, something like that, 95. Okay. And so I said, give me 2 weeks. We'll make your appointment in 2 weeks. I want 2 weeks to think about this, to go over the science, to see what I'm going to be able to do to get the very best results I can possibly get. So anyway, during that 2 weeks, I came up with what is now Kor Whitening. And so when she came in and I started her on this stuff, and I think I had her doing her at home at that time for like 4 weeks. When she came back in before the final in-office visit, she was about 60% improved. And everybody was excited. Her mom was there with her, and everybody in the office was excited to be looking, at her and everything. So then we did the in-office, or my assistant did the in-office. When we were done, she was Hollywood white with no brown whatsoever. So now everybody's in the operatory. She's looking in the mirror, crying. Her mom's sitting in a chair in the corner, crying. All of my assistants are crying, and I'm crying. But I was crying because I just lost 20 veneers. Obviously a joke, but what's funny is my wife, Sharon. Now remember,
his wife's Sharon, your daughter's Shannon. That's
exactly
just too
exactly.
Close. I'm from Kansas. That's just.
So as I mentioned, with all the research and development I'd done before, I never got a cent out of it, never wanted anything. I just gave it away to other companies, for helping me. So anyway, my wife goes like this, and I walk out in the hall with her, and she gets this close to my nose, and she says, "This one you're not giving away." So that was the start of deep bleaching, which then morphed into Kor Whitening.
But I associate you with another obsession.
Yes.
The trays. When you came out with Kor, there were two. In fact, you were as intense about the trays In fact, even to this day, you're
yeah.
still talking about trays.
Oh, the trays are the
Last time I was
cornerstone.
talking to you about trays, I'd have to sign an NDA to even learn more about
Oh,
it.
that's not that wouldn't be whitening trays. That would be the impression trays.
I know, but you've always had a thing with trays.
Well, you know,
is this a fetish of yours? Do you have a tray fetish?
My dad quit school after the 3rd grade to help support his starving family, and he became an auto mechanic. And as he was an auto mechanic his whole life, my whole life, he
What
worked.
city was that in? Or
in Long Beach, California.
So you grew up in Long Beach, California.
Yep. And he worked for a Buick agency my whole life as a mechanic. So anyway, we never brought people in to fix things. We did it. You know, I mean, if the refrigerator needed fixing, we fixed it. You know, so I grew up in a very mechanically oriented environment. Everything was done with these 2 hands and mechanically with the brain. And so I have a background before dentistry in mechanical engineering. And so impression trays have always been a pet peeve of mine. Whenever I would get a plastic impression tray, I'd look at it and I'd say, who the hell designed this? This was either a engineer who's never seen the inside of someone else's mouth, or this was a dentist who has no understanding of engineering principles or physics, or, just like you were saying, some guy at a dental company in the marketing department. And the trays never did what they were supposed to. So now 7 years ago, I got so frustrated that I decided I was going to create my own impression trays. And, you know, luckily we have the KöR lab where dentists send their impressions and we pour up the models, or now we're doing, you know, they send us their 3D.
You have the 3D. KöR lab.
KöR lab, yeah. So that's where dentists will send their impressions to us. We'll make the KöR whitening trays, or they'll send us their digital scans. We'll make the KöR whitening trays. But anyway, because you have Evolve Dental, you have Kor Whitening. Which website is that? Well, it's the KöR Whitening website.
Okay, so it's the Kor Whitening website.
Yeah, so it's part of the company. It's right there in our facility. But anyway, we have thousands of cases coming through, so I have the advantage of having patients' mouths in front of me, hundreds at a time. And so to date, I have studied and measured over 7,000 cases that I built, that I've used in designing the impression trays. And so the impression trays, number one, they have to fit. They have to be, I want each size of them to almost feel like they're a universal size, like a one size fits all. They're not, but they have to have, for instance, you know, if you have someone with a really wide anterior, kind of a flat anterior, well, you're going to end up with this huge tray because it's going to flare out even more. So why not take the same size tray and just make the front of it flatter and wider? So you can end up using a smaller tray in patients with a wider arch, you know, or a wider anterior, you know, things like that. So in going through everything that I thought, and then working with the 3D engineer and making the changes, and then, you know, we have a bunch of 3D printers at the company, and then 3D printing them out, and then trying them on models and back and forth. So I will tell you that when I do beta tests for desensitizer and for whitening, what I'm looking for the most part, at least 70% of the participants, I want to be just average dentists. I'm not looking for the key opinion leaders out there. I'm not looking for the famous guys. I'm looking for the just average dentist, because that's who we are as a profession. And because if they can, with whatever I've created, do great with the whitening or do great with the desensitizer, well, the guys who are even the most fastidious, like the gentleman you were interviewing just before me, well, they're going to even do a better job. Well, but not so with the impression trays. I wanted to go to the very top, and we have NDAs with them also, so I can't give you the names because some of them have contracts with other companies where maybe they shouldn't have been participating with me. But some really big names, and we're talking about arrogant, egotistical, in a good way. I mean, if you know your shit, lots of times you're going to be more arrogant. You're going to be more egotistical, whatever. But these are the kind of people who could never look at something and say it's okay. They've always got to put their own mark on it, say what's wrong with it, and et cetera. So I wanted those people. So I picked 12, and we sent 144 trays. And I told them, look, I want you to use these trays for everything. I want your assistants using them for alginates. I want you to use them for implants. I want everything. And they were very durable, so you can reuse them. You can cold sterile them, etc. And not one of them could think of anything to make the trays better. But here's the funny part: half of them told me that their dental assistants were really, really upset when they ran out of the trays because we don't have.
Okay,
we're not ready to launch them.
What are these trays for?
So these are
full arch trays.
These are full arch trays
for bleaching.
Everything, everything. You for implant, crown and bridge, opposing models, study models. They're not edentulous trays. Let's put it this way. But anything else that you're going to use a full arch tray, that's what these are for. And
sorry to interrupt, but I got a lot of young people in there. Is it a quadrant tray?
No, we very well may go into quadrant trays, but quadrant trays are much less exacting because it's only a quadrant. When you're wrapping around an entire arch, well, now it's one side against the other. When you're just on a quadrant, well, you can move those out a little bit. But there are plans for that, but one thing at a time.
Okay, but answer, it's a very most weighted common question of when does, she's 25. When does a quadrant tray work and when does she need a full arch?
Oh, boy, Jim Glidewell would be the one to ask that. But in my opinion, a lot of it has to do with your techniques. Because if you're not going to provide the lab with a really good occlusal index where they can mount them properly, then maybe you can't mount the upper against the lower properly. I think that's the main thing. It has to do with a really good anterior occlusal stop and posterior. I mean, if you're prepping back here, in the posterior, and you don't have a stop behind that, how's the lab gonna really mount that properly? So for me, single units, even couple units here and there, if the patient has a good occlusion, personally, I'm happy myself with quadrant trays.
So what's the difference between Evolve Dental and Kor Whitening?
Evolve Dental is the name of the company. Kor Whitening is the process, and Kor is the name of the products. Well, now if you call, the bottom line is everybody's learned about Kor Whitening. So, for instance, at the trade shows, we were listed as Evolve Dental. People would come and they would say, "Oh God, we didn't think you were here because we looked under Kor Whitening and you weren't listed." Well, no, we're Evolve Dental Technologies. So the bottom line is we went with the flow. And so now even when we answer the phone, we answer it as Kor Whitening because that's how people know us. The name of the company, however, is actually Evolve Dental Technologies.
But I would still go back to your first triple home run, bases loaded, bottom of the ninth, Kor Whitening is what I loved about you. You remind me so much about Sean Keating too. Because
he's very close to us, by the way.
Because dentist, I mean, like I've never had a remake in my life that wasn't my lab's fault. I mean, they just can't frickin' do anything right. And so the dentist, they always would want to blame it on the lab. And Sean was the only one with the balls to post these impressions. It still had a bloody cotton roll in it. They're still packing string around the deal. I drove 3 hours. The largest removable partial dentures in the old way where they pour up the impression cast away is down here in Nogales, Arizona. You go down to Nogales, that's where all they're mailed in, about 1,000 units a day, and then they drive them across into Mexico and they have the foundry there.
Oh, really?
And so I've gone down there a couple of times, and 90% of the impressions, it's just an impression. There's no lab script, just says lower partial.
Oh my!
I mean, they didn't even take. You think, how long does it take to take a football burr and make one rust seat? I mean, but it's come on, guys. And but anyway, you were the first ones to say, well, look at your bleaching tray. I mean, shit, you didn't even. It's not even trimmed. It's not even accurate. The stuff's leaking out. I mean, these were your customers. Mm-hmm. You're saying, dude, that's a shit tray and it's a deal, and don't even. I mean. So you called it on their deal. And what was really interesting is what people don't realize is that, man, when you're writing like who was the what's the football trophy for the Super Bowl? The Vince Lombardi Award.
Oh, the Vince Lombardi. Okay.
I mean, he was the hardest damn coach ever.
Yeah.
And you were like that. You're like, dude, that's a shitty tray. So when
impression.
So when I was talking about impression trays, I was what you did for me the most is you made me and Jan and my assistants, when we went back to make those bleaching trays, we started doing brain surgery instead of slopping a tray out. So talk about that.
Well, here's.
But do you agree with that assessment?
I'm a picky son of a bitch. I am, because what I'm doing is going in a living human being's mouth. Not only are they a living human being, but they're one that has chosen to put their trust in me. So nothing is going in their mouth unless it's the best I'm capable of. That's just my attitude. And with Kor Whitening, since I'm the designer, I'm the creator, when Kor Whitening is being used on a patient, you know what? I'm that patient's dentist also. Dr. Jones might be the dentist, but you know what? I'm in there too. My name is on that too. And so, and I have to assume that most dentists, I mean, we're human beings, so I can't say all dentists, but most dentists want to do a great job for their patients, I truly believe. And so when they send now we've always had videos, and I'm just step by step on the video, do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this. Some offices will say, okay, well, I'll do this and this, but I don't think we need to do that. And then we'll do that. Well, it's like, dude, you really think I took the time to put this in and to video it if it's not necessary? And so when you skip certain things, then you don't get what you need in the impression. And the whitening trays are the foundation for deep bleaching, for core whitening. If you are not making whitening trays that will truly seal at the gingival margin to keep the saliva and sulcular fluid out, which has antioxidant that if it gets in the tray, it destroys gel on contact. If you can't seal that out, what the hell are you doing? Don't use Kor Whitening. Use some other brand, because you're not going to get results for any of the other work that you're doing. So if you're going to take an impression to make a tray that's going to fit like Crown and Bridge and seal out that salivary peroxidase and that gingival sulcular fluid peroxidase out of there, so that now you can have whitening gel in that tray that's active for 6+ hours instead of the typical 20 to 30 minutes, which the studies have shown, because of saliva, sulcular fluid getting under there, then why go any further? So that's why in the beginning, I think I went overboard. And there were a lot of people yelling at me on Dental Town, saying I was a real bitch. That's the word they were using. Because I'd see an impression and I'd say, if I wouldn't accept this for my own patients, I'm not accepting it for yours.
You should change the name of the company from Evolve Dental to I'm a Dentist, bitch.
But anyway, we grade the impressions. And at a certain grade, we contact the office and we say, hey, there's a problem with your impressions. And we offer to tell them what they did wrong and how to change it so that when they take an impression again, they don't make the same mistake. And some offices are so appreciative of that effort, and some get so pissed off at us and they'll say, oh, just use the goddamn impression we sent you. It's discouraging for me when that does happen, but luckily it doesn't happen all that frequently.
But you see that full distribution in your own family at the Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh,
Everybody's
sure,
got
yeah.
a crazy uncle.
Yeah.
And we're not going to say his name because Ryan's sitting right there. But anyway, so I want to back up a little more but they leaving out steps. So
Yeah.
I have been in dental places that make, say, a bonding agent and talking to a PhD. Remember Samucha at 3M? You remember Samucha?
No.
Samitra?
No, I
Oh my God, I use those. So my sister's nunnery was in Lake Elmo. So whenever I go to Minneapolis, St. Paul, I had to kill 4 hours and 1 minute. So that leaves you Patterson and 3M. So I would go to one of those two, and Samitra was the 3M designer. She is the one who invented a lot of their products. But anyway, she would show me tapes of the biggest brand name lecturers you can think of, and they're mixing and matching bonding agents. And she's got a doctorate in chemistry and a bunch of other white coats, and they're just like, are these guys they have no idea what they're talking about. So here's a company that spends, like 5 years, $5 million with a bunch of PhDs to make a bonding agent. But you go to a dental lecture and some guy says, well, I don't like eugenol, I like ethanol, or I'm going to use vinegar. They're mixing and matching stuff, and they would be blowing a gasket. They're just like, are these guys so? And then the other thing, it doesn't even matter, because if you walked in 100 dental offices and watched them doing any deal, they don't time their steps. So it'll say stir for 15 seconds, and it's like 1, 2, 3. It'll say brush on for 10 seconds, and you're just like, okay, that was 3. So you did 15 seconds of stirring and 10 minutes, So it's like they're mixing and matching kits. They don't measure anything time, and this shit is made on a lab by a doctor who needed you to do 15 seconds. And that's where online CE is lets you down, because unless you go to a hands-on course where you bring an extracted tooth, you cut it in half, and on this one, you only etch it for 5 seconds and stir on the bonding stuff for 5 seconds, and you do that. And the other one, you do it right. Well, until your monkey hands see that this one flicks off and this one you can't break off, you don't get it. So you need hands-on, but thanks for raising everybody's trade deal. But now the question is, number one, I need you to tell her how to take an impression, and I know what she's already thinking. Does this mean I should buy an oral scanner? Should I, instead of making an impression tray, should I be getting 3Shape has one, iTero has one? So what I like to do is throw like so many questions out there that one of them's good, and you'll answer one of them.
Okay. How to take an impression? Well, there's no answer to that because there's so many different kinds of impressions. I'll tell you my favorite. First of all, you got to go back to physics. What do you have to do? You have to get the impression material intimately up against all surfaces in the mouth. The tooth surfaces, the gingival surfaces. You should be getting that impression material interproximally, subgingivally, or not subgingivally, but into the crevice, with no voids and no bubbles. That's what you want. And you don't want anything firm hitting. You want it all impression material in there with the same amount of pressure. Well, what I just described is what happens in a hydraulic pressure situation. When you take a typical impression, your pressure is vertical, straight down. Have you ever seen the wind tunnel studies where they have wind going over a car and they have the smoke and it goes shh? Well, notice how the smoke goes like that and it never gets down into the nooks and crannies. It just goes over like that. Well, that's basically what impression material does as you push it down over a tooth. You need perpendicular pressure. You need it coming in from the sides. And so to have a true hydraulic pressure, you have to have a, quote, closed system. In other words, it has to be fully closed and then pressure. Now, if you had a set of teeth in the middle, and you do that, scientifically, the pressure on any part of that hard structure in there is perpendicular to the structure. So if it's a round ball, it's like this. The pressure is exactly perpendicular, which is exactly what we want. So to me, when I'm taking an impression, the only thing on my mind is, am I going to be creating as much hydraulic pressure as I can everywhere I want it? So when I take impressions, I only, for crown and bridge, the implants, things like that, I only use two-phase impressions. And I choose to go with a putty wash. And actually I hold patents on two slightly different techniques for creating hydraulic pressure. I don't know why I bothered to get the patents, but I did. But anyway, the whole idea is that you want to create hydraulic pressure. How do you do that? If you can, after you take your base impression, when you take your wash impression, can create a seal up at the depth of the vestibule, all the way around, and on the lower, both lingual and facial. Now, as you're pressing on that, you're creating hydraulic pressure on the wash that's now going perpendicular to all surfaces. So you're not going to get any bubbles, you're not going to get any pulls. So how do you do that? Well, when you take your base impression, and if it's putty, you don't put it in and push it up with your mouth. You're not that strong. You have the patient bite down on the tray because the muscles of mastication way stronger than your fingers pushing up. And you have them bite all the way down until they hit the tray. What does that do? Number one, it creates so much force that it pushes it up there. But also, when you're talking about the depth of the vestibule, when I go like this, my finger's up there. What happens when I open? Pushes it down. So if you've closed, you've pushed that way up against the vestibule. Now, when you take your wash impression, you're going to do it by hand. Now you have these long vestibules. You go in and you push it up, and it's not very long before the edges of the putty impression go as deeply as they can into the vestibule, because the mouth is open now, so the vestibule is pulled shallower. And you create that hydraulic pressure, and man, you get an impression that Arlo Guthrie used to say, can't be beat. Remember the Thanksgiving dinner that can't be beat, Alice's Restaurant?
Okay, so my job is to try to predict what she's thinking. She's 25, and she's thinking, well, you don't need to do something that good for a bleaching tray. This is what you would do for a crown and bridge or an implant case, and should she have just gone digital instead? That's only 3 questions, Rod. Come on, there's got to be one good one.
Now, overall, I think digital is better. Why? Because not every dentist is going to take a perfect impression. Well, not every dentist is going to take a perfect digital impression either. But it's easier to get a perfect digital impression than it is to get a perfect conventional impression. But for me, what do I favor coming into the KöR lab, for instance? Oh, absolutely. A G5, because G stands for grade. And we grade from 0 to 5. And
5 better?
5 is the best.
So what is it? 5 what? 5 stars?
5-star basically.
See, I always like 1 stars because I from Earth and we only have 1 star.
Okay.
It's my star.
Okay. But anyway, so I would, if the impression was taken perfectly with extreme sharp detail, because digital is not going to give you as much sharp in corners detail.
Or undercuts. You can't scan an undercut.
Yeah, it is not. And then if it's poured up properly, if everything's handled properly, my opinion, that's the best you can get. But that's going to be 1 out of 50. Really. I mean,
1 out of 50 will send you a perfect impression?
Yeah.
1 out of 50.
1 out of 50.
And in that place, 1,000 removable partials a day, only 10% could do anything to the prep.
Mm-hmm.
Just.
Well, I heard Jim Glidewell speaking on your podcast, about that type of thing. And it's really tough. Now that's not to say like a G4 is a killer impression. It's a killer impression. It's wonderful. It's excellent. And a G3 is fine. Okay. It's when you start getting down to the G2s or the 1.5s or, below, that's when we start really having problems regarding whitening trace.
Okay. Well, she might not even be, she just got out of school. She's 25. She might not even look at her own impression and know if it's a G1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Okay.
So educate her on
now why isn't she looking at her impression? Do you mean that she's looking at her impression but not knowing what she's looking at? Or she's just not looking at it? The assistant took it or whatever. What do you actually mean by that?
Well, we got to go back to when we were 25. I don't know if I can really remember what I was saying, but I'll tell you why I don't want to answer that is because I remember several times with my assistant, Jan, who was with me for 30 years. I looked at an X-ray one time. And I thought, the hell could a dentist be thinking doing that? And she said, Dr. Farran, you did that in 1987. And I'm just like, oh my God, oh my God. I don't even know what it's hard to erase 32 years of memory. So I don't know what she's looking at, but I assume she is taking her own impression and we're going to say full arch to fill everything. So it'd probably be like for a bridge or an implant or something.
Well, here's
and when she's looking at it, she's probably listening to this thinking, well, if I showed you my upper impression, what's going through your noodle to put it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
Well, also you got to remember, what are you taking the impression for? When it's for Kor Whitening, you have got to get a beautiful gingival crevice, facial, lingual, anterior, posterior, because we got to seal that saliva and sulcular fluid out, because if you can't do that, everything else is for nothing. But what if it's for a crown? Okay, if it's for a single crown, if I would be, looking at an impression, well, first of all, I want to be sure that the lab's going to be able to mount that properly. So if I've taken a quadrant, I need to make sure that my bite registration is good. I've got to be sure that my opposing model is going to be good and that the occlusal is good. That's one of the things I'm looking at. The other thing is I'm going to look at the adjacent teeth and I'm going to look at my prep. Doggone it, I better be able to see that finish line without bubbles all the way around that sucker. I should be able to look in there and see, that there's no undercuts. I should be able to see what I've prepped. Now, of course, how good is your prep? That's a whole different story. But whatever it is that's in the mouth, at least in those areas, I should be able to see them. And if the young dentist out there, if they're not teaching that kind of thing in dental school, I sure as hell was taught in my dental school, all about that. But they need to learn. That's because the last thing, a young dentist out there who maybe is working for somebody but wants to be an owner, wants to have their own practice. Well, now you're getting into business, and you better have happy patients. Now, forget about business. We want happy patients, but you don't want that lab saying, hey, we can't work off of this impression. Now tell the patient you got to take off work again. You got to come in again. I got to stick you with a needle again. So the impression, when you talk to lab owners, that's their number one thing. They can build wonderful things as long as you give them the right impression. But if you don't give them the right impression, they can't build anything better than crap that you'll put in that patient's mouth. So I think that many dentists, this is a downfall. This is something they're missing. They're not spending enough time looking and evaluating the impression after they take it. You can't take an impression and just go, oh, okay, it's good. No, you got to spend a couple minutes.
Here's a problem I had when I got out of school. So I had to see these quadrant trays, and I noticed everybody liked them more if they were more sideless. It was like the sideless Premier triple tray.
The double bites.
Would
or
win.
triple trays.
Yeah, the triple tray. The
Yeah.
sideless Premier triple tray would win, and I'm looking at that, and it's like, yeah, because it's almost doesn't exist. And then the metal quadrant tray was doing the worst. So I would sit there and say, well, the only thing a quadrant tray can do, a triple tray can do, is distort the bite. So I was drying off the tooth and then putting the wash, blowing that down, and then making the putty and having bite down there. So I had the bite impression all in one, and I'd send it to the lab, and they look at me like, oh my God, is he like not right in the head? It doesn't even have a triple tray. And so I always believed from day one that the only thing a triple tray could do is negative. And if you're just taking a single tooth, then impression, bite, all in one. And these metal ones, once you put something in their mouth and it's deciding to tell them to bite, they're and when there's none of that tray in their mouth, you have them bite down, just close their mouth. So am I not right in the head?
Well, I'll tell you, I agree with what you say in general. And I had the same impression, but I came across something that I learned actually from the Maddow brothers.
Nice.
And
Dave and Rich Maddow, best seminar, TBIS, the best.
No, this was the Richards Report years ago. And then that was something that they learned from Gary Schoenrock. He's the inventor of the
H&H impression technique?
No. I'm not a fan of that. I from a physics standpoint.
Who did the H&H impression technique? Was that Joe Stevens of Kisco in Wichita?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, but that's not what you're talking about. What were you talking about from the Richards Report?
It's the laminar flow, the laminar. So here's what it was, and for me it didn't work. It's where you would use something like a blue moose, a bite registration, heavy durometer, really stiff material.
Is that a polyether blue moose?
Yes. Yeah. No. It's a polyvinyl.
It was okay.
It's polyvinyl, and and when you have your patient close into centric, you're not looking here where they've been in the impression. You're looking at the opposite side of the arch, making sure that because you can't see through that impression tray. And then what he would do was drill a hole from the side at the mesial, drill a hole at the side from the distal. Then when he put that back in, he would take his wash and inject it, and it would go around, hydraulic pressure, and come out. Would move out any possible blood, any possible other fluids, etc. And that was great, but the hydraulic pressure, from a standpoint of physics, what's the most efficient type of pressure? It's hydraulic pressure. That's why we use hydraulic jacks on cars and things like that. So there was so much pressure, it still would push that out. So now when you take it out of the mouth, oh God, did it look great. But then you would pour it up, and because it had sprung back a little bit, which you couldn't tell, now you have a small casting, or what we call a narrow casting. And then when you make the crown on that, it would fit too tight. So then people were saying, oh, put 2 layers of dye spacer on there. Bullshit. I mean, are you going to put the layers over the margins also? I mean, my God, you're admitting distortion then. So anyway, I got to thinking. Now, you're familiar with Park Hill. Did you know Nelson Gendusa? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nelson's not been there for a long time, and the company sold, I think, a few years ago. I don't know. I have no idea. But I was very, very close with Alex Mitchell, the owner, before he passed away. I saw him like a second father. And he had come out with a material called Mach 2. Mm-hmm. And it was made to make dyes from, real quick. But it's a polyvinyl, and the stuff is watery, really low viscosity. So I thought, God, I wonder if I use that as my wash, I wouldn't have to push all that hard because it did flow. So I wouldn't create a lot of hydraulic pressure. And when you talk about the hardness, the rigidity of the blue moose, and then the even greater rigidity of this Mach 2 itself, God, that thing's going to be rigid. But can it be done that way? Because, the adjacent teeth have some undercuts, right? So I contacted Nelson Gendusa, who, we'd worked together on certain things before. And he said, forget about it, Rod. There's no way in hell that's going to work. It's going to break. So I said, thanks, Nelson. And I went and tried it. No problem at all. Unbelievable fit. Absolutely unbelievable fit. And I did this on many, many cases. And so I ended up writing an article. And when Nelson said something about it, I said, oh yeah, Nelson, you told me it wouldn't work. Oh, I never said that. But that's a technique I used to use quite a bit. That was so simple and worked literally every time with probably.
But you know what the lesson I'm afraid the kids might have missed on that is that's the value chain. You have such a dysfunctional relationship with insurance companies because you don't even know who these people are. You never had lunch with them. At the CDA meeting last week, how many people extra from insurance? I remember one time Bob Ibsen called me, and he called me up and he was so mad at you for something. I don't even know what you said, but you said something in Dental Town. And I said, Bob, why are you calling me? You own a jet. Either call him up and send a jet down to pick him up, or you fly down there. Why are you calling me? That's the only thing that's wrong with gossip. The only thing that's wrong with gossip is your sister's going to come up and tell you all this stuff and feel better. And you're like, okay, but you should have used all that energy and talked to my sister, my other sister. And what I don't like about gossip is that you're going to feel better and you did nothing for the situation. And I told Bob Ibsen, and he did call you.
Yeah, well, actually, you called me.
Oh, I called. I was being.
I was out of state somewhere, on the campus of some college that I was looking at for my daughter. We were visiting a kid, and you called me on the phone, and you said, "Hey, Bob Ibsen's really pissed off at you," et cetera. And so, he and I did talk after that, but he and I did a lot of things together, and he and I had a lot of arguments.
Yeah, but was it arguments where it was two passionate guys arguing, or was it good versus bad, good versus evil?
Both.
I mean, it was both.
Both. And
yeah. how does and I'm just curious, guys. How does bleaching bonding veneers go from gentlemen can disagree to good versus bad?
Oh, well, I did a lot with him for years before the whitening thing came out. And so I wrote a lot of articles for him. I did. I was a huge fan of his Rembrandt toothpaste and other Rembrandt products. And of course, that was sold off to Oral-B. And then
it was Procter & Gamble, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Procter & Gamble owns Oral-B.
Yeah.
And then it got swallowed by Gillette.
And then because the FTC came in, they said, no, you got to get rid of the whitening thing. So then they got sold to Johnson & Johnson, and now it's being produced by one of their subsidiaries. And I don't want to say they've ruined the toothpaste, but it's not as good as it was. It's still what I use. I still use the regular Rembrandt toothpaste for a number of reasons. But anyway, so Bob Ibsen's publicist, gal by the name of Betty Light, had a publicity firm called Light Years Ahead in Beverly Hills.
Does she still do it?
No, I haven't been able to find her name in a long time. It's funny. She took me out to dinner one time at an Italian restaurant, and we're sitting there, and she says, well, we want you to do this TV stuff. And I said, why me? And she said, well, because you're sexy. Now, I'm sitting right next to a mirror, and I looked at my fat face with a bald head, and I said, would you please talk to my wife and tell her that? And I started laughing. She says, no, you don't understand, Rod. She says, in the publishing world, you have published several books. That makes you what we call sexy. So in other words, of interest to the audience or whatever. Okay. But so I did a lot of, a number of television things. I did a satellite radio media tour one day where I did interviews on, I think it was 38 radio stations. One after the other. So some of the things that they did I thought were great. It was when it came to deep bleaching, and Bob Ibsen was a real pioneer, but he was also a real corporate businessman. It was with some of the bad connotation associated with that. And it was that side of him that I had some problems with,
So Ryan, do you remember Bob Ibsen? Oh my God! You know what I love the most? My favorite Bob Ibsen story is, he did well for himself.
Oh, absolutely.
And he had an 18-hole golf course on his house. We're having lunch over there one day, and we're all passionately talking about something, and I just happened to wonder, okay, where are my boys? And I look over, they're having a golf cart race on his golf course, and they're doing donuts on the putting green of the last putting green, and my heart stopped. I'm like, okay, God. I'm dead. And I said to Bob, oh my God, Bob. And Bob looked at it, he goes, he couldn't quit laughing. And I'm thinking, and he says, oh hell, I'd never golf on that. It'll give the yard people something to do. And then he went on with his bleaching deal for couldn't have given a crap that my 4 boys are having a race on a putting green.
Let me tell you my favorite.
But I got to tell you one more funny story about
go
that.
ahead.
So he finally sold that, and I think he sold it to I think it was Johnson & Johnson for $1 gazillion, and then unbeknownst to him, it was swallowed up by Gillette a few months later for a 40% premium. He had more money than any of us would ever know what to do with, but he'd been married to Marcy forever, and Marcy said, "Oh no, you're still going to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I don't give a crap what you do."
He did, and he kept on.
My time.
He kept on,
and so his lawyers told him, "Well, you have too much money to do dentistry. One bad case, you'll get sued." So he, just like anterior cosmetics, so he went and opened up a woman's shelter for domestic violence, knowing they're going to punch in your front teeth. And he just did anterior restores on domestic violent girls.
Really?
And when I would go visit him, he'd keep his eye on, he wanted to go home and see his honey bunny, but he couldn't pull in that driveway before. And it was just so hilarious. Oh. And then we get there at 5, and she was ready for us at 5. She had the chips and salsa and his favorite beverage drinks or whatever. And my God, what a cute couple. What's your favorite Bob Ibsen story?
So my son and daughter went to Santa Margarita Catholic High School in Orange County, and
so you're Catholic then. Or you're
kinda,
okay. It's complicated.
Let's put it this way: my wife is Catholic, and my kids are Catholic, and I kind of went along. But at any rate, when I think there was 850 or so in the graduating class, it's a big high school, and so they sent these notes out to parents that they were putting together these kits for the kids going to college, and to donate little things that they think that kids would be, would need with them. So I was talking with Bob Ibsen, and he asked me something, and I said, "Oh, Bob," I said, come to think of it, I said, I don't care if you do this or not, but the Rembrandt toothpaste is expensive, and certainly my opinion is, it certainly was back then when it was even better than it is now, it's well worth the cost. But they've asked me, etc., and a lot of these families are well off financially, so they might tend to be your customers. If you'd like, don't do it for me, but if you'd like, if you want, you could send a tube of toothpaste that we could put in, each of those kits, and maybe, you might pick up some customers that way. Totally up to you, Bob. Next thing I know, he has sent a truck down from Santa Maria with 800, whatever it was, cases of Rembrandt toothpaste. So each graduating student got a case of Rembrandt toothpaste.
He was amazing, but big ol', I always look at big ol' alpha bull males like yourself, like Bob Ibsen. They're usually the 400-pound gorilla is a complicated dude. I mean, you know what I mean? I kind of look at it as an energy level. Like you guys are just always pacing. You're always doing. You always got 20 irons in the fire.
Yeah,
and it's just been fun to watch. So on your journey, was it because bleaching caused? Oh, and by the way, I want to say one thing about sensitivity. When the A dentist and the B dentist and the C dentist, you know, we are talking about earlier, there's some of that legendary stuff. You got to look in the details because some of the guys, when the cosmetic revolution took off, and it was kind of led by Ivoclar and LVI and Bill Dickinson.
Sure, yeah.
I think Bill Dickinson and Bob Stanley, those two guys, it was kind of like their orchestra. And if anybody had sensitivity with their bonding agents, they, you know, you were doing it wrong. You didn't use rubber dam. You overdried it. You underwet it.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
I would call these guys up and I call bullshit, and then they would show up in their lecture like Harvard and sensitivity and blah blah. You know that's crazy. So when I'm in their office, I walked up front to Emma and I looked at the schedules paper back there and I started calling patients saying, "Yeah, this is Dr. Farran calling from world famous dental office 101," and so they cemented 10 Empress crowns, all glass. And I'm just wondering, are you having any sensitivity? My God, I've been eating so much Motrin, I have black diarrhea. And then they started doing a bunch of dentist work. And I can give you names of dentists who went to these famous guys who had their teeth all root canaled, while the guy still lectures on the circuit that he's had no sensitivity. So remember,
yeah.
they always, the top always tries to distort the individual by not being transparent, and then you believe it's you and you're the crazy one. And I thought I was overdrying, underdrying, not rubber dam. No, I had a rubber dam. I had a rubber dam on the tooth, and I put a rubber dam on the ceiling so I could say I practice under a rubber dam because I didn't know what they were saying. They kept saying you got to practice under rubber dams. Okay, I got one around the tooth, got one over my head, and it was and then I noticed that you with the bleaching sensitivity was an issue, and then your next greatest product was a desensitizer. So did the desensitizer come from when bleaching took off? It was all about sensitivity. When bonding took off, and then what was
before you go any further, I gotta say, with all the stuff you're telling them, Dentaltown was the huge changer of that, because before Dentaltown, everybody practiced solo, truly solo. And when all the bigwigs out there said, "Oh, this is the way it should be," and you're having problems, and they're telling you, "Oh, it's just you," you really thought it was just you. But Dentaltown, ever since you started that, is where people go on and say, "Oh my God, it's not just me. It's these idiots there. They're feeding me a bunch of BS." And to me, that one thing, when anybody asks me, what is the greatest thing to ever happen in the history of dentistry? I mean, in history, the greatest thing to happen was Dentaltown Forum. Because, you know, what you did, you know, and I think you said the Dentaltown so that no dentist ever has to practice solo again. And it is so true, because back then and now, you have a problem and the bigwigs are saying, "Oh no, it's just you." You go on Dentaltown and look it up and you'll find out whether it's just you or not. Anyway, I wanted to say that because that is so important to me. I think you have done the most important thing that's ever happened to dentistry.
Oh,
I know,
gosh.
I do.
Can you just say that one more
time?
No.
It is absolutely true. But anyway, sensitivity.
But you said they were feeding you a line of BS, and I love bologna sandwiches. What is But was the sensitivity from whitening that led to your obsession with sensitivity, or was it sensitivity from bonding?
Yes and no. I before,
or are you just an obsessed guy? Maybe you're just an obsessed guy.
Before the whitening thing ever happened, I had done a lot of work on sensitivity. I published an article in Dentistry Today, I think it was, many years ago, about sensitivity. But then there's the whitening sensitivity also. Now that, once I opened the company, well, now that's on my shoulders. You know, it's like, why is it so sensitive? And so the desensitizer that we were using, I was really happy with, and oh my God, for the most part, the dentists were absolutely loving it. I had no glutaraldehyde in it, you know, no worry about tissue toxicity or anything like that. And it was wonderful, but there was a small incidence of sensitivity. And whenever anybody what was really aggravating to me, not from a business standpoint, but from here, is when we would have a new customer come on and they would say, "Well, we want to send everything back because our first 2 cases had a lot of sensitivity, so we don't want to use this. I'm thinking, oh God, it was obviously coincidence because didn't happen to other people, but it just hurt me. It bothered me so much. And so for years on Dental Town and everywhere else, I said, well, yeah, I really like our sensitivitor, our desensitizer, but I'm researching to come out with something that is even better. And so finally, all my research, was over and done, and we launched that. And it's something that it's a desensitizer that I think is the best out there. However, in all the paperwork that we have, literature, and what I'll say here is never say never. I don't ever want anybody telling their patients, oh yeah, you're going to be able to use Kor Whitening and you're not going to have sensitivity. Don't do that. You don't know what size of dental tubules. You don't know what flare of the orifices that patient has. There's always going to be this patient here, this patient there. But in general, we've just been really excited about it. But the most exciting thing is that it's for any type of sensitivity. Is under temporary restorations, under final restorations, whether they're bonded or not. What I'm really excited about is it works so well on, just generalized sensitivity. And, my first clinical study was in perio.
Would they find that on the Kor Whitening website? Would they find it on
go on the Kor Whitening website and probably calling Kor Whitening.
I'm on the website now, so would I collect for patients?
I'm embarrassed. I don't even deal with that.
Okay.
I deal with all the clinical stuff. I don't even.
So
I never even get on our website.
Whitening, solving whitening sensitivity. So I would go there probably, right?
Yeah, but that's going to be that white paper is specifically about the etiology. What causes the sensitivity? What is it? You know what I like in all of my research?
Yeah, let's just that's why I'm glad you do overtime. Yeah. Because she's thinking sensitivity. I mean, there's desensitizing toothpaste. Is that type of sensitivity? There's sensitivity. Some people put glue on a tooth or whatever. So what are you talking about? Aim at someone who's under 30.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If the patient has 100% of their dental tubules with natural smear plugs in them, is that patient going to be sensitive?
No.
Okay. So the answer to this is you got to go to the cause. You got to plug open dental tubules, and you need to do it now.
Were you drinking with Dr. Bronston's hydrodynamic theory of the odontoblastic tubule? Were you drinking with Dr. Bronston?
Oh, I would love to. I'll tell you that. Fabulous guy. But so if you're looking, people talk about fluoride. Oh, use fluoride. Well, what happens? You create calcium fluoride precipitate crystals over time, weeks, months. And whenever you're going to try and treat sensitivity with fluoride, chances are you're never going to fully seal them, and it's going to take a long time. So in my opinion, you want a desensitizer that you apply that will plug those tubules just like that and have those plugs, those synthetic plugs, stay in there. So it's got to be durable. So to me, that is the goal of desensitization. Everything else is just hocus pocus. I mean, a lot of people have talked about using ACP, MI-paste type of thing to desensitize. And there's a lot of, back and forth on, well, does it really work? Because it was designed to remineralize enamel. Enamel is 98% calcified or mineralized. And it only works to remineralize on highly mineralized surfaces. Well, dentin is not nearly as highly mineralized. So a lot of people are saying that it's BS that ACP will not desensitize dentin. On the other hand,
what won't desensitize dentin?
MI-paste, okay. ACP, amorphous calcium phosphate. And so, a lot of people are saying that can't happen. Now, on the other hand, I'm thinking about it, and the peritubular dentin it's going to be around 95, 96% mineralized. So it's really high mineralization also. So maybe it could work. Bottom line is, it's a growth process. You're growing the material. Again, if you have a sensitive situation, you want to fix it now. And so that's why I favor that type of desensitizer, and that's the type we
Okay, if we talk to
have
anybody
launched.
outside of dentistry and say sensitive teeth, first thing they think is Sensodyne. So what is how does Sensodyne desensitizing toothpaste fall into all this?
So now that's potassium nitrate. And a surprising number of dentists believe that potassium nitrate plugs dental tubules. It does not plug dental tubules. It will migrate up through the dental tubular fluid to get to the pulp, the A delta nerve fibers that line the pulp. Those are the fibers that, when stimulated, will cause discomfort. So potassium nitrate theoretically interferes with the repolarization of neurons. Just like a gun. You shoot it, you got to reload it, right? Same thing with nerves. They fire, then they have to recharge, basically.
And this was David Block's company, Sensodyne, who he sold to GlaxoSmithKline.
Yes.
So you're saying it did not mechanically block
No,
the odontoblastic
no.
tubule. It actually...
It theoretically prevents the repolarization. So in other words, the nerves can fire once, but then they can't repolarize. Well, if you read the studies, which I've spent many, many days reading the studies on this, you will find that about 1/3 will show that about 1/3 of the victims, the test patients, had a really good result from it. About 1/3 had an okay result, and about 1/3 got no result at all. And the bottom line is, if it's going to work, what you're really doing is numbing that nerve, trying to numb that nerve, but you don't know how well it's going to work. And the patient's got to keep using it and using it forever, because you have to keep replacing it. Because
that sounds like a great business.
Yeah, I suppose so. So don't get me wrong. I'm a fan of potassium nitrate. Hey, I like to cheat. I'll take everything I can get. So potassium nitrate, yeah, great. But that should, my opinion, that should never be your first line of defense.
Okay, well,
it should be supplemental.
I need to back up even more.
Yeah.
Because when you're in these dental schools, they're saying, okay, help me with this, Howard. So it's an abfraction. They tell me they don't even know what causes it. My mom's a dentist. She always puts in a class 5 composite there. My dad's a dentist in the same practice. He doesn't. And then they both tell him to use Sensodyne. And they're like, so we don't know what it causes an abfraction. Some fill all class 5, some don't. Some use Sensodyne. So can you throw anything, how she could wrap her mind around just that?
As far as the restorative end of it?
Well, so we don't know what an abfraction is, and then some dentists on Dental Town fill everyone in with the class 5 composite, and some don't do anything to it.
And it's funny that you said that we don't know what that is. It's so funny. The pendulum swings. Now at first it's toothbrush abrasion, and then it's abfraction, and so now the abfraction people they say, well, there's no such thing as toothbrush abrasion. Excuse me? When enamel is about the same hardness as steel and dentin is the same hardness as a hardwood, and you have abrasives in toothpaste, and you're rubbing them, you're going to tell me that there's no such thing as toothbrush abrasion? You got to be from a different planet if you don't think that there's such a thing as toothbrush abrasion. So it's a combination, I believe, of both of those factors.
It's multifactorial?
Yes, it is. And which is what I really loved about the original Rembrandt toothpaste and why I had my patients. Think about it. And everybody out there, the younger dentists even. If you see a patient that has the little crevice, ledge at the edge there, and they'll say, Doc, why is that? And they're able to hook their fingernail. They don't like that. They hate that. And so, to me, those areas, those are toothbrush abrasion, because they're not your typical, abfraction-ish looking thing. And so the original Rembrandt toothpaste, instead of using high abrasive, It used papain, which they called, their proprietary name was citroxane. Do you remember that? And it's a proteolytic enzyme that doesn't just dissolve proteins, it dissolves organic matter. And in fact, one of its main uses, oh, by the way, it comes from the papaya fruit. So it's all natural.
Like a black hole.
Yeah. And so its main use is as a meat tenderizer. But anyway, so Bob Ibsen, he adds papain into it to remove the stains so we can use less abrasive. And you know why he did that? Because, Bob was one of the early pioneers on tooth-colored restoratives, right? And so basically he got sick and tired of placing these composites and polishing them and making them beautiful, and then abrasive toothpaste making them dull. So that's why Rembrandt first came out.
So regular Colgate Crest was too soft, and so that soft would scratch it. And the Rembrandt was harder, so it would polish it?
So Rembrandt, they use almost no abrasive in it. And they just use the citroxane to chemically remove. So in other words, here's how I told my patients.
Okay.
Here's how I explained it. You got a brand new car, beautiful paint job, and your car is real grimy now and you want to wash it. And you don't want to ruin the paint. So I'll tell you what. I'll give you a bucket of water, and you can choose from a firm sponge or a soft sponge, because what do most dentists tell their patients? Oh, use a soft brush and don't brush too hard. They're missing the most important part. So the analogous thing, you can choose from a firm sponge or a soft sponge, okay? And when you wash your car, after you dip it in the water, you can rub hard or you can rub gently. Well, if you pick the firmer sponge and you rub really hard, yeah, you might eventually mar the paint. But what if, instead of putting car soap in that water, I put Ajax or Comet kitchen cleanser on there and you used it? You're going to ruin your paint job like that. It's the abrasive that goes on the doggone toothbrush that you're using. So by Bob Ibsen using very, very little abrasive, and instead,
which was hydrated silica?
I don't know what abrasive it probably was. But using the citroxane in there, or the papain, to remove it, you had extremely low abrasion. And it was wonderful. And it was so effective that I used to promote publicly that anytime I had a patient on Paradex, to combat the stain, I made sure that they used only Rembrandt toothpaste. Oh, Rod, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Well, a few years ago, a whole bunch of articles came out in the various dental journals about using a toothpaste with papain in it, which was Rembrandt, for just specifically that problem.
You have always been a master of the literature, man. Where does that come from?
What do you mean, master of the literature?
Well, I mean, you've always been studying and researching and looking up. I mean, most dentists, they come up to a fork in the road, they'll call up their best friend from dental school and they'll say, do that. You're the type of guy that goes and studies it on every Friday for a year.
Well, I'll tell you what. You ever watch the movie Patton?
Patton? About the general?
George C. Scott?
Yeah, that's one of my faves.
Well...
And he's a 4-star general. He wasn't a 5-star general.
Exactly. And you remember that his arch enemy basically was Field Marshal Rommel.
On the same team.
On what?
That was on his team. His rival on his team, Rommel from England. But they were fighting.
No. Erwin Rommel was the German tank commander.
Who was? Montgomery. Well, okay.
Yeah. So
Montgomery was
Monty,
a rival on his side, and he was going against Rommel.
So Erwin Rommel, he had the Panzer tank. We had the crappy Sherman tank. You know what the nickname was for the Sherman tank? The Ronson, like Ronson lighter fluid. Because the joke was you hit it one time with a shell and it explodes. So we had the crappy Sherman tanks. They had these Panzers. And now Erwin Rommel was a field marshal. So he was the equivalent of like a 4-star general. And before the war, he had been an instructor at the German Military Academy, and he had written a book called, I think, Battlefield Tactics or something like that. And so anyway, in North Africa, when Rommel's troops came up against Patton's troops, Rommel should have kicked our ass. But they didn't. And Patton won. So now in the movie, and this is absolutely true, based on an interview of Patton himself. In the movie, you see Patton after the battle looking over this battlefield that he has won. And he raised his fist and he said, "Rommel, you magnificent son of a bitch, I read your book." He credited the win for having read Rommel's book, so he knew what Rommel was going to do. Well, that's how I've always approached things. So many people, there's a problem, and they say, well, let's study how to fix the problem. Well, I think you're missing a step. You got to learn about the problem. Why is the problem happening? You got to figure out everything about why it's happening before you have a chance of figuring out how to fix it. And so that's always been my thing. And I don't know why, but it started at a very young age. And, when I was in dental school. And that's just the way I've always approach things. And when I find a problem, it bugs me until I figure it out.
I want to stay on sensitivity. I just want to stay on the word sensitivity. There's again, we're old dogs that should be put out to pasture, and the real world for these people under 30 is they did an MOD composite and it's sensitive.
Yeah.
So that's where they're at. Why is that MOD filling on a first molar sensitive, and when they come back, they usually just adjust the bite.
Yeah.
That's the whole treatment.
And it doesn't work when you adjust the bite, right?
Right.
Really, I mean, people out watching, how often when you adjust the bite is the sensitivity gone? Never. Almost never.
It's just to give them enough hope to get out of the chair so you
Yeah.
don't have to see everywhere.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe give them a little bit of time for the sensitivity.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I think it is. No one can say with certainty what it is. But when you are doing your bonding, you're doing two separate things, whether it's with one liquid or not. You're removing the smear, and then you're plugging those dentinal tubules up with your bonding agent. And so now you have these fingers of bonding agent. So you have only bonding agent, only dentin. Now this area is where the dentin has the holes in it and the bonding agent has fingers going into it. That's the hybrid zone. A lot of people don't understand what hybrid means. And it's a hybrid. It's a combination of the resin. So that's where it's mechanically gripping. I've seen studies that show that when you do this, you'll open a large percentage of the tubules. And when you now go to seal them, you don't seal all of the tubules, so that many of the tubules are still open. That makes sense to me. I don't think anybody can prove that, but that makes sense to me when I came across that years ago. Those studies. I will tell you something. Making a pitch for a product that I have nothing to do with, and I learned about this product from my old friend Alex Mitzel of Parkel. And they use some products that use a molecule that's called the 4-meta molecule. And I don't know the chemistry of it. I don't know how it works. But that molecule starts out acidic, and it is a resin molecule, and then it becomes neutral. So the cool thing is that for instance, with the brush and bond, when you use that on the tooth, the same molecule that's removing the smear plugs is the same molecule that's actually penetrating. So it's virtually impossible to open up a tubule without simultaneously sealing it. And I used to be on the list for beta testers for, at least 8 different companies for their bonding agents. And as a thank you, what they always do is send you product. You've done that, I'm sure, many times. And so I had these drawers full of bonding agents. And bonding agent is expensive, right? So after I used the brush and bond, it was holy shit. Now, I pride myself on my technique and my isolation, and I never did have a major problem with sensitivity, but I had problems. With the brush and bond, I didn't have any problems. And so, anyway, I would say to my assistant, Nellie, let me have the brush and bond. She would bring me some other brand because it was going to expire. I say, no, Nellie, I want not that. I want the brush and bond. She kept trying to push it on me for financial reasons. She was she's the one that stocked the office, and all that kind of stuff. And so we had a heart-to-heart one day, and I said, Nellie, just throw that other stuff out because I'm not going to use it. Oh, well, Dr. Kurthy, you should use it because these things are so expensive, and you won't have to buy, more. And I said, okay, Nellie, I said, I have a solution. I'm going to use it, but I'm going to use those other brands. But from now on, I'm only going to use them on patients I don't like. And she looked at me, and she couldn't figure it out. And I said, Nellie, I'm teasing. I said, I was making a point to you. And I said, I want you to take the stuff and throw it out. And so she did. But I became a big fan of that for that particular reason. And I'll tell you, it's never failed me for anything I've ever used it for. And I have I don't even know the people at the company anymore. The company's been sold.
What company?
At Parkell.
So you know who owns Parkell?
I don't know who owns Parkell now. Some other company bought it.
They were, Directa has bought Top Dental, Orsing, Parkell, Ronvig. He's out of Sweden. And so you can get some IKEA furniture while you're on the way. I actually got to go by that guy's house when I was in it reminds me of Warren Buffett because I went to Creighton in Omaha. And we used to drive by Warren's house. He still lives in that house. It's this little bitty house. And that IKEA guy, just like Warren, he had like $80-90 billion when he's still alive.
Wow.
I said, the guy said, where's he living? He goes, hell, I'll drive you by his house. They're just a little bitty. You could just tell those guys, they were... If someone goes like,
but I bet she was well taken care of, though, wasn't it?
Well, it's so funny because people
nice
sit there and
landscaping.
say, they got crappy stuff. I mean, this guy spent his entire life making furniture better, faster, higher quality, lower cost. And the people always sit there and say, oh, it's low cost, it's crap stuff. I heard that with Glidewell in the beginning. Like, oh, that's a crappy crown. All these elitist, smug smacks that you just wanted to smack upside the head. But they didn't realize that when other guys were charging $250 to $300 for a crown, that millions of Americans could never get a crown. And what I loved about IKEA is, the dentists are fine. They're just totally fine with outlawing everything that's not perfectly quality. Then you say, okay, well now they have nothing. Oh, I'm fine with that as long you're fine with it. You're a rich dude, and I love the fact that Henry Ford did not pioneer the car. He was like the 86th car company. But everyone else would be like five guys making a car for a king. And Henry's like, no, we're going to make a car for the working man.
Yeah.
And I've always liked those guys. I'll never forget when I graduated and I first went to the Pankey Institute. I got to listen to Erwin Becker for a whole day talk about how there's A patients, B patients, C patient, D patient. You should only focus on the A patient. I just realized, well, my entire pedigree is C, D, and F. So you just said the Farrans and Kansas should not have a dentist. And I've always loved the people who can not make it for one person for the rich, but make it for the masses. And Parkell did that their whole life.
You know what Sharon calls you?
What?
My wife, Sharon? She calls you the Ford Taurus dentist. Because she's heard you say several times that your patients drive Ford Tauruses.
Yeah.
I don't know if you still say that or not.
I do. And they used to make fun of me. I remember one time I was lecturing and then the next room was AACD, and they say, if you don't want to do this, you could always be the Walmart dentist like Howard. And I thought, well, that's the biggest compliment in the world. I mean, Walmart's the largest distributor in the world, and I know there's more Walmart people than there are Nordstrom's people.
Yep.
And a lot of the Nordstrom's people, the only thing on their resume is that they came from the Lucky Sperm Club. You know what I mean? It's never, you're never talking about the founder.
Yeah.
It's always the lucky sperm that swam out of that. But enough of that. My gosh. So Parkell now was sold to Directa, which owns Top Dental, Orsing, all that kind of stuff. So what are you most passionate about now?
Oh God, I have a lot of passions. Howard. I just dentistry in general, and
Oh, you can't say just dentistry because you started a cigar company.
well, I did,
And most dentists that smoke cigars, they do it in the closet. Because if you're a dentist, you can't enjoy a cigar.
My enjoyment of cigars is pastime. I'm not a daily cigar smoker. But when I do smoke a cigar,
Well, if you
I
drink
really
more,
love
that
it.
could change. When you're not smoking a cigar every day, you're just not drinking enough. So,
Yeah, well, it could be.
increase your drinking.
I don't drink at all.
Yeah, I know.
But I do enjoy cigars. So I started that cigar accessories company because of a couple of things I had invented. That's my fun thing to do. If you're going to talk about my real passion, that's going to be back in the dentistry and of course, because now the company.
But where did this come from? The cigar trouble? Because knowing you, there was some scientific thing.
Okay, absolutely.
Some mechanical engineering thing. You're not just going to leave this and say, well, I don't want to support tobacco.
Okay, all right.
What was your amazing mind doing? You were smoking a cigar.
So I was introduced to cigars by my son back in 2003. And so anyway, I started smoking some cigars and decided that I'm a pretty straight shooter. I haven't never been really in trouble. And I wanted to change that. So I started getting sneaking cigars from Cuba, which were illegal. And my favorite one is the Monte Cristo No. 2, which has the tapered tip. Now, for those who smoke cigars, you cut your cigar, you somehow get a hole in the end of it, and then you draw them. Now, premium cigars are handmade, so there's no two that are the same. And you're going to be there to relax, and so you want to puff on your cigar and have it be able to draw through it easily. And you don't want to be, like trying to suck a golf ball through a straw, because that spoils it. And so a lot of times you just have to throw your cigar away if you have to puff too hard and it's what they call a tight draw. And so they had things like ice pick type of gadgets you could push down there to try and open it. But then you spread it out even more and you crack the wrapper, or now as soon as you pull it out, it just fills back in. And so anyway, I thought, I have an engineering background and I'm a dentist. We dentists are clever, and we dentists sure as hell have some great little tools. So I made myself a little shaft with little blades on it that I could actually insert into the cigar and pull out some of the tobacco. Because if the draw is too tight, there's too much tobacco in there. And son of a gun, it worked like crazy. And so
this is it right here.
Yeah, that's it right there. And so anyway, everybody that would smoke cigars with me would say, "Oh, let me use that thing. Oh, yeah." And so obviously at KöR Whitening, we do a lot of work with FedEx. And my two FedEx reps are cigar smokers. And we're a very big account with them. And so they like to take me out to lunch, and then we go have a cigar. Every time they go to reach for that little tool.
Can I just interrupt there? Look how FedEx is networking with the value chain. You're a big account, and so the FedEx people come and take you to lunch.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So Delta Dental's giving you $100,000 a year for 20 years. When's the last time you had lunch for them? Oh, you couldn't pick him out of a freaking police lineup. And the only time he ever hears from you is some letter with profanity.
But anyway, so Mark said, "Dr. Kurthy, you're so entrepreneurial. I can't believe you haven't done anything with this." And so I said, "Well, Mark, I've thought about it, but you know what? You give me 1 week and I'll make a decision." So I decided to create that, which turned out to be a heck of a lot more involved than I thought it would. And another thing that I created. And then
who's this guy?
Yeah, who's that guy? So then a year and a half later, and I spent not $1 on marketing. Just open up a website, and whoever wants to buy it. And certain people, it just kind of went viral. And a year and a half later, I was contacted and told that we had been nominated for, and now we're in the top 5 for best cigar accessory of any type in the world. That's
so explain the accessory, the perfectsmoke.com accessory.
Well,
because I'm watching this video. I assume this is on Pornhub. Because that is you.
That's a good-looking guy, huh?
That is. Is that your backyard?
That's my backyard, yeah.
In what city is that? Long Beach?
It's in Coto de Caza, South Orange County, which is where they filmed that infamous, stupid program, Real Housewives of Orange County.
And wasn't the Queen Mary always there? Or
In Long Beach.
And the Long Beach and
Long
the
Beach.
Spruce Goose?
In Long Beach.
Okay.
Yeah. And so anyway, I said, we're in the top 5. I didn't even know we were nominated. And so
this is it right here.
Yeah. So we flew to Germany, and that's the cigar industry's version of the Academy Awards, red carpet and the whole
Germany?
bit. Yeah. And son of a gun, we won. So it's been kind of a roller coaster ride. We have 3 products out now, and I have 5 more currently in development.
So you're augering out a little hole in the middle. So you're not spreading it to break the paper.
Exactly. And
you're just augering a hole.
Yes, but it's doing more than that because it's got cutting blades and pulling channels. It all depends on this. A 30-degree sharp edge is a European or U.S. style knife. Okay, like a steak knife or a chef's knife. And that will cut tobacco. Well, now where I have some other channels, it creates a 90-degree sharp edge that will pull tobacco. So it's not only cutting and removing some tobacco, but it's pulling the rest of the tobacco so that as you pull it out, it fills in the hole.
And this is like an auger,
Yeah, because you don't want smoke going through a hole. You want it going through tobacco.
So you thought of this while doing a root canal, an engine-driven 300 RPM night tie.
You know what? I've been accused of that many times.
Have you?
And because the people in the cigar industry, they think it's hilarious that I'm a dentist that owns a teeth whitening company.
Right, right.
And so they'll say, "What is that? That thing looks like a dental tool."
That is hilarious. So then you also have what I'm excited about is you have a webinar coming up.
Yes.
The Science of Tooth Whitening with 1 CE credit offered March 19th, 17th. So St. Patrick's Day is the 17th. So by the 19th, you should just be sobering up. They probably, your attorney's now meeting you at the jail, letting you out. So Thursday, March 19th, 2 days after St. Patrick's Day. Tell us about that course. It's on e-learning or my dental learning. Dental learning.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Who owns dental learning? Is that AGD?
I think it's owned by same company that owns Dental Product Shopper.
Oh, Dental Product Shopper. Okay,
yeah,
right on.
I think so. But anyway, just like I talked about the General George Patton thing, learning things, we as doctors, we need to understand what it is we're doing because no 2 patients are the same. So when you go to a course learning how to do a root canal or periodontal surgery or whatever, you better understand it enough that once you get in there and, it's a little bit different than you thought, you know how to properly modify things. And teeth whitening is no different. It's treatment. It's just not slapping gel on the teeth. So what this seminar is, it goes through the science behind teeth whitening. Why teeth get white? Or why they won't get white when you're not doing it correctly or when there's problems. So it goes over all the problems. It goes over what the science tells you need to accomplish. And then it tells you how you go about doing what the science says you need to do. But I believe, to be good, truly good at anything, you have to understand the science inside and out. Because you're dealing with people, they're all different. You have to know what to modify. For instance, we have different kits. There's different lengths of time you might be having the patient whiten at home, et cetera. If you don't understand, if your patient comes back and they have sensitivity, if you don't understand what you're doing, what are you going to do about that? If you do understand, you know what questions to ask them, you know what to look for, you know how to figure out why is it they're having sensitivity.
Okay, but I'm gonna lock that door, and I know you got to leave in like 10 minutes, but you still haven't answered the 2 biggest bleaching questions.
Fire away.
In the world. One is an incredible amount of dentists believe that the in-office bleaching white has no research. In fact, they say all the research claims that it does not work. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is when you start talking about internal bleaching, internally bleaching the tooth.
Yeah.
Some people think that you just kill the tooth, resorption, endo. So does the in-office bleaching light work? And this external bleaching with Kor Whitening, can you do it inside the tooth, or is that the kiss of death? So internal bleaching and bleaching lights.
Okay, so let's talk about the bleaching light first. I wish we had time to talk about how bleaching happened, but bleaching was stumbled upon. It wasn't developed scientifically. Someone did something and they were, oh, look, it whitened the teeth. We weren't even trying to do that. So anyway, the whole thing started
Was that
out.
in Omni International in Arkansas? Is that where that was discovered?
It was some dental study group, and what they wanted to try and do is figure out how to make the gums heal on teenagers after you deband the teeth. Because especially back when we had the big silver bands and everything, the teeth looked like hamburger. So they were saying, well, let's make trays that fit over the teeth and gums and put this stuff on the market, in the drugstores called glyoxide. Let's put that on there. That's supposed to make and let's see if it makes the gums heal. Well, they came back and they said, and remember, teenagers' teeth whiten much quicker than adults. Hey, am I crazy, or are the teeth getting lighter on these patients? Yeah, they're getting lighter. Well, guess what the active ingredient is in there? 10% carbamide peroxide. And so that's where it all started out. It had nothing to do with science. And so let's figure it out. So anyway, we're Americans. And that means we want what we want, and we want it now. And so everybody's trying to figure out, well, how do we speed this up? Instead of having our patients wear trays, for X amount of time, and back then it was watery gels. We had to put sponges in the trays to soak up it was crazy. Well, let's try putting on strong stuff. Well, it burned the gums. Okay, well, let's try putting rubber dam on there. And let's do that. And so they were putting on high concentration hydrogen peroxide, and it wasn't doing very much. And one study I was in, we were using heating lamps, the red ones, the infrared red ones, and killing pulps right and left, And so then heat will kill pulps. So now when I think back to high school chemistry, they had us put this and this in the dish and nothing happened. But when we put it over the Bunsen burner to put energy into it, heat energy, the reaction went. So let's say, let's use light energy. Yeah, because you add light energy and it's going to make a reaction go. It's going to speed it up, right? And that's true for endothermic reactions. So let's use a light. Let's use a laser. Well, that all sounds great until you realize that the breakdown of hydrogen peroxide is an exothermic reaction. Yeah. And for those out there who might not know the difference, if you ever go skiing or up in cold weather and you buy those little packets to put in your gloves that warm your hands, and you kind of crush them where there's a packet inside a packet and there's a chemical reaction that makes it get hot. Or the most common thing is when you pour up your stone or plaster, as it sets, it gets hot. Those are exothermic reactions. Instead of needing energy to go forward, they've got to get rid of energy to go forward. That's the breakdown of hydrogen peroxide. So according to Le Chatelier's principle of chemical equilibrium, if you try and force energy into an exothermic reaction that's trying to get rid of energy, you'll actually slow it down. Well, now, the lights don't really give you that much energy. It's kind of, all show and no go. So I'm not saying that the lights will slow it down. But can you think of a reason, based on what I've said, why you would ever want to use a light? And what is the light supposed to do? Make the breakdown go faster. Really? Well, you know what? There's such a thing as chemical acceleration. I could make I could make a little jar of hydrogen peroxide break down so fast that it would explode and break the glass like a hand grenade with chemicals. So because I can chemically determine how fast it's going to break down, why in the world would I want that? And then the other thing to think about is, if these lights are supposed to work so well, making it break down faster, why does every company that provides a light with their system have a dual barrel syringe with a chemical accelerator in it? Why would they need a chemical accelerator if the light worked or the laser worked? And I used to be okay with it. I used to think, okay, well, just don't get the light too close, and if the patients want that. But then, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever, we have had studies that show that use of the lights actually cause pulpal damage. It's reversible, it's temporary, but when you combine high energy photon energy and high concentration hydrogen peroxide, it causes the pulp to secrete more substance P. Substance P is a neurotransmitter, and its only function is to cause pain and inflammation. And so if by using a light or a laser causes a lot more sensitivity during that in-office session, but it's not making the teeth whiter even 1%, then it's a horrible thing you're doing to your patients if you're doing it. Before those studies, I said, it's okay. You go ahead, the light's not helping you, but go ahead and use the light if you think the patient wants it. Just psychologic treatment, whatever. Okay, do that if you want. But ever since those studies, it really kind of upsets me because the studies, they showed, and I did these clinicals myself. They showed that when you use this particular whitening gel with no photon energy, you have very little sensitivity. When you use no whitening gels at all, but with the lights and lasers, you have no sensitivity. It's when you combine the bleaching gel with the lights, then you get that sensitivity, and we're talking more than tenfold sensitivity. Why would you put your patients through that?
So what type of bleaching light do you use in your office?
Of course I don't use one, yeah.
So when you look at ethics, who's the only man who owned a big old company and said, we're going to sell bleaching and we're not going to sell light?
Well, I don't think there's only one person. There's certainly me, but Dan Fisher doesn't sell light.
Okay, so that's two.
Yeah.
But what do you think of? But name the companies that sell bleaching and a light.
Oh, I don't want to do that.
I want you to.
Let's say all the other ones pretty much.
But what does that tell you about their ethics when they know it's so their out is, well, the patient's crazy. Well, when your Aunt Lucille says the other night I saw two witches flying over and I think they were headed to Derby. If you say, well, Grandma, I saw them too, you're enabling her.
Yeah.
If your other aunt, so what do you think of dentists that know this but buy the light and market and advertise it and all that stuff like that?
Well, it's a tough situation.
It makes it hard. It makes it hard for you. And then the next time they post on Dental Town, they're holier than thou.
Well,
it's like, okay, you're holier than thou, but
yeah. Let me tell you what I tell our dentists, the dentists that use my system, they'll ask me that and they'll say, Rod, people come in and they want the light. And I know the light doesn't work. And we know the Kor Whitening is like crazy effective, but then they leave and they find someone that does have the light. So, what should I do? Should I get a light? Should I, whatever? And so here's how I have always handled it in my practice. They call up. Hi, do you do that XYZ lightning or laser whitening?
It's always gonna be Zoom lightning.
Yeah,
is that the biggest branding?
That's what we hear about the most. Yeah,
and that's sold by who?
That's sold by Philips,
which was Discus.
Which was Discus. Yes,
and then Robert Heyman and Dorfman.
Yes,
they sold that. So that's the one here they ask about.
Yes.
Yeah, Zoom lightning.
And so, or laser, or whatever, and you could say, well, no, we don't use that because we use a system that's much better and blah, blah, and you go into the benefits of it. And the patient on the other end is thinking, yeah, bullshit, you just don't have the light. And so then they hang up and they go somewhere else. So the way to handle it, and I suppose you got to have a light in your office to be able to say this, but we've never had anybody challenge us on this. But they call up and you say, hey, do you do that? And they'll say, and what your answer is, you say, oh, yeah, we've done a ton of those cases with the laser or the light. And we can do that. We actually have a system that works much better than that, and it's the same cost. But if you want that older technology with the light, oh yeah, we can do it. Well, tell me about the new stuff. So because you don't want them to think, well, I just am too cheap to buy a light or something like that. And I've gotten so many calls from dentists laughing and telling me that's what they're doing in their practice and how well it works. But I understand the pressure. You know, you're a dentist, especially if you're a young dentist. You have all your school loans, you have your practice loans, and you're trying to figure out how to get new patients coming in, and you're telling new patients about what they need, and they're not making appointments, they're not paying you, but you've got to pay your staff. I understand the business pressures and why a lot of dentists would feel compelled to give the patients what they want. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else.
Okay,
but that's how we handle
bleaching? What about internal bleaching the tooth?
Internal bleaching is great, but it's not core bleaching. It's totally different than core bleaching. So, for instance, if you have an internally dark tooth, and what's that usually going to be from? Trauma of some sort, right? Even orthodontic trauma that can be from. And most of the time, you're going to have a very, very thin or no visible pulp on the radiograph, right? And maybe maybe the tooth has had a root canal. And so with the core whitening, you're going to get some success. When you're done, everything's going to be lighter. And the difference, the contrast is going to be less, but it's still going to be darker. Probably. Sometimes it's not. So that's when you would do your internal bleaching. Never do it the other way around. You never, ever, ever do your internal bleaching and then do your full arch bleaching. Because you've totally lost control. You may end up with that one tooth you did internal bleaching on being too light. Lighter than everything else. So you do all of your whitening if the patient's going to have that first. Then you do your internal bleaching. Now, here's the concern is that if you get peroxide percolating down the canal and going out the dentinal tubules into the periodontal ligament, remember that one of the pathways that hydrogen peroxide will break down, it can break down to oxygen and molecular oxygen and water, or it will break down to the radical way, where it gives off hydroxyl radicals or superoxide radicals, perhydroxide radicals, hydroxyl radicals, superoxide radicals, and hydrogen ions, etc. Well, now these radicals can cause damage in the PDL and create cementoclasts that start doing your external resorption. That's what you got to worry about. So number one, you got to put a great seal in there. So you have to enlarge the access area enough, especially in the cervical area, where it's going to get in, where the bleach is going to get in. Now, but you've got to seal over the root canal filling there. So you want to prep into that. I like to go in about 3 millimeters. So now how are you going to fill that? You're not going to fill it with amalgam. Are you going to fill it in with composite? Well, composite's going to shrink. So you're going to use bonding agent? Oh, great. You're going to do that. Bonding agent's going to get all over the walls of everything. It's going to block your peroxide from getting into the tubules. No, you use glass ionomer, because when glass ionomer, does it have polymerization shrinkage? No, it expands, right? So now you don't have to use, glass ionomer is self-bonding, and it expands when it sets instead of shrinking. So you're going to get an impeccable seal. You do that just coronal to the osseous crest radiographically, because that prevents you from having any chance of hydrogen peroxide getting out into the PDL. And when you do
hydrogen peroxide, but that's carbamide peroxide?
No, you'd want to use, well, it depends on the technique you're going to use, whether it's a walking bleaching technique or a chairside technique. I think the Dan Fisher Ultradent, they have, I can't remember the name of the product, but they have a product just specifically for internal bleaching. And I think it's a great product. You could certainly use our in-office, but in that particular situation, our product isn't going to be any better for you than anybody else's product. And because Dan has one that's specifically made for that. But now, if you're going to use the walking technique, what you want to be sure that you're going to do is you want to seal it before the patient walks away. Because remember, saliva getting into any peroxide destroys it on contact. So you have to have as good of a seal as any restorative composite you've ever placed. So what you do is, beforehand, you slightly bevel the orifice, okay, around the orifice, and you etch that, and you can even put a little tiny bit of bonding agent on there. And then you do all this other stuff, and then you put that whatever bleaching gel you're going to be putting in there, and then you take some flowable composite and you run it around that bevel, you cure it. You run it around, cure it, and you keep closing it, and then you take it out of occlusion. Now what's going to happen is that stuff is truly sealed in there, and you're going to get a great result.
Final question before Ryan shoots me. But the young kids have the hardest time communicating with the patient, because the patient, it's the personal skills that are just as hard to learn as the prep skills. The patient will say, "Well, it'd be cheaper just to go get the crust strips at Walgreens. So why should I do this KöR? Why should I just go to Walgreens and CVS to get some crust strips?"
And who's saying this?
Patient.
Any particular patient? Male, female, old, young?
Well, it's going to be the cheaper. They're going to say, well, how much is the crest strips? 50?
Okay.
And how much is the in-office?
All right, so there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts here. First of all, hydrogen peroxide breaking down to water and molecular oxygen does nothing for whitening teeth. Nothing. It's the radicals that come off when breaking down this other route that whiten the teeth. The perhydroxyl radicals specifically do the most work. Problem is that when you go down that pathway, one of the things that's given off is hydrogen ions. What are hydrogen ions? Acid. pH, potential of hydrogen. Hydrogen's acid. So all whitening gels, as they break down, they give off acid. That's why in all of our gels, I put a buffering system in them so that they don't become acidic as they're being used. What are the two most common chemical stabilizers out there? Well, for chemicals, for stabilization, we only use refrigeration because I don't want it stabilized. I saw you interview someone that makes whitening products a few weeks ago who was bragging about saying, "Oh, we use a stabilized whitening gel." Really? I don't want to stabilize whitening gel because it's too stable, it won't break down in the mouth. When it's in the mouth, I want it as unstable as it can be. But, so what a lot of companies that don't want to refrigerate, like we do, they have to add chemicals in them so it doesn't be totally broken down before it's used. And what are the two common stabilizers? Phosphoric acid and an anhydrous base, or a less than fully aqueous base. And so imagine these crest white strips, how much acid is probably in there, because you're talking about supermarkets. It's going in all these trucks that get up to 165 degrees Fahrenheit inside, and they sit there and they go from store to store and all this kind of stuff. So they can be very, very acidic, and they're not going to be as unstable as you'd want, so they don't work all that well. But the good thing, Howard, is that teenagers' teeth get really, really white really, really fast. And from my perspective, I would never have let my kids use those. But parents are like that. In general, one round of crest white strips for a 14-year-old or something like that, I'm not opposed to that. And it will usually help them because teenagers' teeth get white so easily.
I just want to tell you one last thing I forgot about Bob Gibson. Yeah. So we started Dental Town, the community. You were saying it was a good thing because we got to know it wasn't just us. With dentaltown.com, no dentist has to practice alone. So I ran this idea, and I told all my friends about it. And when we started that, Bob Gibson called me. He said, "Do you have advertisers lined up?" I said, "No." He said, "You got any money lined up?" I said, "No, it's all in-house." And when we started Dental Town magazine, he goes, "Well, hey, I'll buy the inside cover, the back cover, the inside. You guys, I'll buy your top 3 medium spots until you can sell them to somebody else. I thought, how?
I know you told me that when I was at that college campus.
That? And I said, but Bob, what's in it for you? And he goes, I think this would be good for dentistry. And one thing
great, yeah.
that all these sea captains have, like you, Ibsen, all these guys, Dan Fish or whatever, myself included, is man, if you're helping my homies, you're my friend. And I don't care if you're dental learning, dental town. I don't care who you are, and that's the way you've always been. So your webinar is it's on. Well, I just have a link. It says my.demio.com, but it's on dental learning, right?
I guess. I you know what?
Well, you can
I know I have a webinar. They didn't even tell me. I have whoever set that up for me.
I know. I'm always having to do these modeling agency gigs. They don't tell me until I'm on the way over there. But hey, seriously, man, thank you.
I'll tell you what.
Dental Town wouldn't have been a success if it wasn't for legends like you and Kanka. I remember when Dental Town got started. Anywhere I go, they go, yeah, I heard Rod Kurthy's on that. I heard John Kanka's on that. I mean, it was nothing about Dental Town. It was these legends like Kanka and Kurthy on the deal, and so I'm forever grateful, man.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful just for what you've done for dentistry. I mean, I just think it's just unbelievable. Because I remember when I was starting out as a young dentist, there was no Dental Town. How many times did I have problems where I would love to have asked somebody, but I didn't know who to ask?
And when everybody said it wouldn't work, I was just like that selfish guy saying, I need Dental Town. I need to show my friend an x-ray and a picture. I need help. And the motto was with dentaltown.com, no dentist would ever have to practice solo again.
Exactly.
And we're one species and we're one profession. And, when people start, you'll say a number and you'll say, okay, well, was that American or was that global? Well, I would hope it's about the species unless I had a reason to narrow it down to 4.5% that were Americans. And the 10 Commandments, the 11th commandment is never talk bad about another dentist because we're all on the same team. It was an honor to podcast interview you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Howard. And for anybody watching, if you want to watch that webinar, just call KöR Whitening and ask them to send you a link.
And what is the KöR Whitening? What's the number?
I don't know. It's probably I never call it, Howard. You have it on
866-763-7753. So it's 866-763-7753, or just go to KöRWhitening.com. KöR is KOR, and you don't have to have the umlaut thing. You can just use English KOR.
Yes.
Whitening.com. And this is not a commercial. No one's paid me money. But I hope you at least brought a cigar. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you so much for all you do. And give your wife, Shannon and Sharon.
Will do.
Tell them hello.
All right.
All right, buddy.
Thanks.